Constrictive emotions have a lot more nuance and kind of grittiness, in part because of the phenomena of the light bulb. You can think of electricity flowing through a wire without producing any light as an analogy for healthy, normal, and constructive energy. In other words, when you have grace and flow, you don't have as much friction. And without that friction, you don't have as much heat and distinction to bring the type of consciousness that we engage with the world through, which is language. So language is the process of taking the whole and chopping it up into bits. And each language chops things up into bits a little bit differently. Each paradigm used for the chopping results in different cuts. You can think of an infinite color spectrum, an infinite grayscale, and the system is what decides the regularity of the cuts. Now, a good measurement system is relatively consistent, whether it's centimeters or inches or any other metric. It has some consistency, whereas cult frameworks can emphasize some bodies of words or some realms of reality down into nuanced millimeters, whereas other areas are left incredibly vague. You can look at things like the Eskimos using 400 words to describe different types of snow, and the relative vagueness of the word love, which might easily be broken down into 400 words, but that would take effort. And constrictive energy and constrictive feelings come when an energy that is flowing meets resistance. Anger is, in fact, one of the most typical byproducts of flowing along and meeting resistance. You can just look at road rage. What's going on? I want to move, and something's in my way. Someone cut me off. I got to shoot them because they're blocking my flow. Well, you don't have that without the flow block. And in that state of friction, you can almost think of a constrictive feeling, a constrictive state, as a traffic jam. In other words, if there's no jam, if there's no block of any kind, and you have an uninterrupted, graceful, and symmetrical flow into and out of different faces of the ecological framework we're all a part of, you have relatively little consciousness. You have relatively little material to stew on. But as soon as you take all those nice cars moving along at 80 miles an hour and you take them down to 5 mile per hour gridlock, well, now you've got time to stew and notice. They cut me off. They weren't there. This, that didn't happen. Why? When is this going to go? And now you've got all this energy in gridlock. Now, in the analogy of the electric incandescent light bulb, you have that electricity flowing through it again. And what the incandescent light bulb does is it creates resistance. A series of spiraling, very small wires that make it difficult for the energy to flow freely. So the energy has to fight. And in that friction, you get light. And that's a perfect analogy for human consciousness, that human consciousness is born in the cut, in the wound, in the fight, in the resistance, in the tension. that leads that unconscious flow of electricity that's moving very, very fast and effortlessly, in which we don't have words for, into the light bulb of intersecting patterns of energy that lead to friction, that lead to light, that lead to awareness. So in this way, the enemy is often the teacher of human consciousness more than the ally, more than the friend. The ally agrees. The friend, I agree with you 100%. There's no development. However, when there's a disagreement, now you could spend several hours. You could spend a week just going head to head in a debate. Well, what about this fact? And what about this fact? And what about this fact? So you get a lot of verbosity in constrictive energy. And this is one reason why an hour is barely getting started for the long tapestry and archaeology of the human state called pain, or anger, or shame, because these are slow, bottled down energies, so there's time for nuance. Meanwhile, you talk about joy. How can you talk about joy for an hour? First of all, if you're in a joyful state, you don't want to talk for an hour. And so I'll leave that for the other side.